God a new song. Sing unto God, and we'll all sing along. All the earth a new song unto God. Shirul Adonai, Kol haaretz. Shirul Adonai, Shir Chadash.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom, Barbara.
Shalom.
I was realizing what a silly thing it is to sing the B part on mute. Like, my lips are not moving with yours because I'm singing a different part, but that doesn't help anybody but me. But it's good. I've said before, and I will say again, I am so excited to hear all of the harmonies you all have been practicing in your homes when we are finally together again. It's going to be so beautiful. Shabbat Shalom, we are glad to be with you. We are glad to celebrate Shabbat. If you are praying along with us and you're looking for the prayer book, there's a link in the chat to the flip book, digital version of the prayer book that you can follow along with. We're using Mishkan Tefillah if you have one at home. And we will call out page numbers. And also, as I like to say every week, if you are looking for the bat mitzvah of Faye Harrington, you have come to the wrong stream, but the right synagogue. You're going to want to go to emmanuelhouston.org and click the button at the top corner for a streaming video page, and you're going to want to look for the stream for the Barish Sanctuary, which is below the stream for the Prologue Chapel, and that's where you will find the Faye being bat mitzvah. But if you have come to pray and not with Faye, then you've come to the right place. So we are going to continue to warm up our spirits with the words of Ma Tovu, page 74.
Ma tovu, ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael, ma tovu, ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael, ba'ani beruchasecha, avo beitecha, eshtachave elecha kodshecha, v'yiratecha, ma tovu, ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael, Adonai ahavti, me'on beitecha, u'mekom mishkan kvodecha, mishkan kodecha, ba'ani eshtachave, be'echna'a, evrecha lifnei Adonai, osi, ma tovu, ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael, ba'ani tefilati lecha, Adonai et ratzon, Elohim beroch
A blessing for our bodies, however well they are working, on page 77. Join me in praying together. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, sovereign of the universe. With divine wisdom you have made our bodies, combining veins, arteries, and vital organs into a finely balanced network. Wondrous maker and sustainer of life, were one of them to fail, how well we are aware we would lack the strength to stand before you. Blessed are you, Adonai, source of our health and our strength. Baruch atah Adonai, rofeh kol basar umafli la'asot. We continue with Elohai Neshama on the next page.
Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. Elohai neshama shenatata bi
A poem for this morning as we prepare for the Nisim B'chol Yom, the blessings for waking. As we talked about last week, they sort of mimic the process of waking up each morning and finding our souls in our bodies and appreciating all of the miracles that happened. I came across this week this beautiful poem that I thought sort of captured that as well, and it is called "What to Remember When Waking" by David White. In that first hardly noticed moment in which you wake, coming back to this life from the other, more secret, movable, and frighteningly honest world where everything began, there is a small opening into the new day, which closes the moment you begin your plans. What you can plan is too small for you to live. What you can live wholeheartedly will make plans enough for the vitality hidden in your sleep. To be human is to become visible while carrying what is hidden as a gift to others. To remember the other world in this world is to live in your true inheritance. You are not a troubled guest on this earth. You are not an accident amidst other accidents. You were invited from another and greater night than the one which you have just emerged. Now, looking through the slanting light of the morning window toward the mountain presence of everything that can be, what urgency calls you to your one love? What shape waits you in the seed of you to grow and spread its branches against a future sky? Is it waiting in the fertile sea, in the trees beyond the house, in the life you can imagine for yourself, in the open and lovely white page on the writing desk? We continue with Nisim B'chol Yom, which begin on page 80. Barbara, you are muted.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has given the mind the ability to distinguish day from night. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who opens the eyes of the blind. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who frees the captive. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who lifts up the fallen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who stretches the earth over the waters. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who strengthens our steps. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who clothes the naked. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who gives strength to the weary. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who removes sleep from the eyes, slumber from the eyelids.
Let's keep going.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who made me in the image of God. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has made me free. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has made me a Jew. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who girds Israel with strength. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who crowns Israel with splendor. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
As you heard last night, and I hope you tuned in last night, this is Shabbat Shirah, the Shabbat of song, the Shabbat that we read the story and celebrate the story of the crossing of the sea. And so for our moment of study this morning, I wanted to share with you an Israeli poem on that moment of crossing the sea, and to ask you to think, and you can write in the chat about a line or an image that you connect with in this poem, which is about relating the story of the crossing of the sea and the story of the Exodus from Egypt to our own lives. This is called Every Person Needs an Egypt by Amnon Ribak. And it goes like this. Every person needs to have their own Egypt to draw themselves out of, like Moses, strong-armed or with bared teeth. Every person needs dread and great darkness and consolation and promise and saving, so to know how to look to the heavens. Every person needs a prayer, just one, to be with them fluently on the lips. Every person needs to be bent over one time. Every person needs a shoulder. Every person needs to have their own Egypt to redeem themselves from it, from a house of bondage, to go out in the middle of the night to the wilderness of fear, to march straight into the water, to see it open to each side in front of them. Every person needs a shoulder on which to carry Joseph's bones. Every person needs to stand up straight. Every person needs to have their own Egypt and Jerusalem and one long journey to remember forever in the soles of their feet. If there was an image that stuck out to you from that poem, something that you connected to, I want to invite you to share it in the chat as we continue with our service. But for me, it's a powerful way of living that commandment that comes in the Passover Haggadah that says "B'chol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa mitzrayim," that every person is required in each generation to see themselves as if they went out of Egypt. What is the spiritual necessity of bringing ourselves out of the Egypts of our lives? As you are writing those lines in the chat, we are going to continue with Psalm 150 on page 100.
Hallelujah, 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 because you, hallelujah, because hallelujah, hallelujah. hallelujah, hallelujah.
We continue with Chatzi Kaddish, page 106.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה ועלמד יברח ירתני ימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל בגלה בגלה ובזמן קריב Emanu, Amen. Yeheshme Rabba Mevorach, Le'olam Elon Me'omaya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach, Ve'yishtabach, Ve'yitpa'ar, V'yitramah, V'yitnasei, V'yithadar, V'yithaleh, V'yithalal, Shemei K'Kudshah, Richu le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran me'alma ve'yimeru Amen. Please rise. Yai la 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 la.
Join me in the words of Yotzer Or on the top of page 110. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech Osei Shalom Uvorei Et HaKol Hama'ir La'aretz V'ladarim Aleha Berachamim Uvtuvo Mechadesh B'chol Yom Tamid Ma'aseh V'reishit Ma'ara Abu Ma'asecha Adonai Kulam B'chochma Asita V'la Ha'aretz Kinyanecha Titvarach Adonai Eloheinu Al Shevach Ma'aseh Yadecha Ve'al Me'orei Or She'asita Yifa'arucha Selah Or Chadash Al Tzion Ta'ir V'nizkech Ulanu Meheira Le'oro Baruch Ata Adonai Yotzer HaMeorot. And at the top of 113 is a reading that we were talking about today in Gems of Torah, about how leaving and ending is a necessary part of becoming, and how much God loves to see becoming in us and becoming in God's self. So join me in reading at the top of the page. Once or twice in a lifetime, a man or woman may choose a radical leaving, having heard Lech Lecha, go forth. God disturbs us towards our destiny by hard events and by freedom's now urgent voice, which explode and confirm who we are. We don't like leaving, but God loves becoming. Baruch Ata Adonai Habocher Be'amo Yisrael Be'ahava. Shema Yisrael.
Teach us how to live. Fill our hearts with joy and all the love we have to give. Gather us in peace as you lead us to your name, and you will know that you Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Please be seated. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levacha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha Veshinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'beitecha uv'lechtecha v'derech uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha uv'kshartam le'ot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'neinecha וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ומשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
The Midrash says that only 1/6 of the Israelite community left Egypt. That 5/6 of the people who were enslaved there just stayed. They had gotten so comfortable, even in their own oppression, that they stayed and they disappeared to time. They became a part of Egypt, and that they were not able to free themselves even after God and Pharaoh had freed them, which is sort of a heartbreaking statistic. And I think that this Shabbat Shira asks us this question, which is about how will we seize the opportunity to free ourselves from Egypt? How will we say yes to the invitation to cross the sea, even when it's scary, even when the sea doesn't part immediately? We looked at this Midrash in Gems this morning about the fact that the sea didn't part until the Israelites walked into it all the way up until their noses, that the sea doesn't always create a pathway forward until we take the first step. And there were so many Israelites who chose not to take the first step. And we have to be the people who take the first step as we face this pandemic, as we are in the depths of this sea at this moment. We want to be amongst the people who take ownership of our own redemption and the redemption of other oppressed people, instead of being the people who stick around in Egypt, who say, I've grown too comfortable here, I'll just stay. So with that in mind, I want to share one more poem with you, a poem about that moment where we stood on the shore of the sea and maybe had anxiety or trepidation or cold feet, but chose to march forward anyway. It goes like this. They say cold feet are a sign of turning back, the failure of internal will. But I say it can be the other way, the body's anticipation of things to come. Whether demons are nipping at your heels or gnawing within, here's the thing: settle quietly, close your eyes, then take the most deliberate, deep breath as though it were the very first, God's breath. And when you can feel it penetrate every bit of your being, making the rest of your life possible, you open your eyes and take the first step out of the sea of reeds. Watered feet are just the price of coming home. We offer these words from our Torah portion, Micha Mocha, on page 122.
Who is like you, Adonai? Who is like you, Adonai? Michamocha ba'elim Adonai, Mikamocha edar b'kodesh, Nora tehilot, osef eleh, Nora tehilot, osef eleh. Who is like you, Adonai? Who is like you, Adonai? Ya la la la, ya la 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 la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la.
So, yesterday was a momentous day in my life. Yesterday was my hair's first birthday. Yesterday marked 1 year since my last haircut, which is why I look like this. Because I have yet to find a way to get a haircut for me that feels safe. I know I'm not judging other people who have gotten haircuts. I'm also not judging people who have spouses and partners and friends who cut their hair. But Annie and I have accepted that that is not in our skill set, and that's okay. And so I just haven't gotten a haircut in a year. And part of the experience for pandemic for me has been about trying to learn to better delineate between needs and wants. I don't need a haircut. I want a haircut. I want to not look like this. I want to not have hair in my face all the time. But I don't need a haircut. And I know that my family members who are in high risk categories need to not get COVID. That they cannot live with COVID, and I can live without a haircut. And for me, and again, I am not judging the decisions you have made around all of these things, but for me, that was the calculation. I don't need a haircut. And so I haven't gotten one. Someday I will again, God willing. And I think that the Amidah is also about delineating between needs and wants. The Amidah is also called the Shemona Esrei, the 18 blessings, and on a weekday it contains obviously 19 blessings for that, mostly that ask God for things, that ask God for the things we want in this world. And there is this idea that we give Shabbat to God just like God gives Shabbat to us. So in the Amidah on Shabbat, it's shorter. We don't ask God for things. Except it's not entirely true. We do ask God for one thing, and that's peace. Even though there is this idea that we're giving God the day off, and so we're going to refrain from the bakashot, from the prayers that are requests on Shabbat, we still have prayers that are requests in the Amidah, and particularly the blessings, the prayers that ask God for peace. And I think that is about understanding the difference between needs and wants. There are things we ask God for on the weekdays that are wants. And on Shabbat, we refrain from asking God for the things we want, but we ask God for the things we need. And we know that we need peace, that this world cannot live and cannot be sustained without peace. So even on Shabbat, we ask God for that. So as we rise in a moment for the Amidah, the challenge I want to give you today on this day of celebrating my hair's birthday, the challenge I want to give to you is to think about the needs and the wants in your lives, the things that you've learned over this last year that you can't live without, and the things that you've learned you can live without. To thank God for the blessings of the needs that God is meeting, and to ask God specifically for those things that you need most dearly and that this world needs most dearly. We rise together for the Amidah on page 124.
Adonai, Sefatai Tiftach, Kofi Agite Hilatecha. 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu v'Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chastei Avot V'Imachot, U'Mevi Geula Livnei B'neihem, L'ma'an Shemo B'Ahava, Melech Ozer U'Mashiach U'Magen. Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Bezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechaye HaKol atah Rav leHoshia. Mashiv HaRuach u'Morid HaGashem, Mechakel Chayim Bechesed, Mechaye HaKol Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Verofei Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Bal Gevurot, Umidom Elach, Melech Memit Umechayeh, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah lehachayot hakol. Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh hakol. Nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו ואדיר שמך בכל הארץ. ברוך יושיענו וכו ישמיענו ברחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני אלוהיך, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור. הללויה. לדור ודור נגיד גוד לך, ונצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. Please be seated.
Barbara, it's been a little while since we've heard that funky Yismachu. Can we do the funky Yismachu?
Absolutely. Yismachu v'malekutecha, shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'korei, oneg Shabbat. Yismachu v'malekutecha, shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'korei, oneg Shabbat. Mekadeshei, Mekadeshei sheli Shabbat. Kulam yisbehu v'yitanu v'torecha Shabbat. Yisbehu v'malekutecha, shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'korei, oneg Shabbat. Yisbehu v'malekutecha, shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'korei, oneg Shabbat. Nashvi ratzita bo v'kidashto Shabbat. Chemdat yamim u'totarata Shabbat. Yisbehu v'malekutecha, shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'korei, oneg Shabbat. Yisbehu v'malekutecha, shomrei, 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 Shabbat v'korei, oneg Shabbat. Zeichem למעשה בראשית Shabbat. Zeichem למעשה בראשית Shabbat. יספחו מלכותך, שומרי, 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 Shabbat v'korei, oneg Shabbat. יספחו במלכותך, שומרי, 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 Shabbat v'korei, oneg Shabbat.
Thank you for that. It's my favorite. And I see some people in the chat were like, yay! So we are going to continue with mentioning other things we're grateful for with the words of Modim. We'll say the words together of the English words of the Hebrew prayer on page 138. I invite you please to join me. We acknowledge with thanks that you are Adonai, our God, and the God of our ancestors forever. You are the rock of our lives and the shield of our salvation in every generation. Let us thank you and praise you for our lives which are in your hand, for our souls which are in your care, for your miracles that we experience every day, and for your wondrous deeds and favors at every time of day, evening, morning, and noon. O good one, whose mercies never end, O compassionate one, whose kindness never fails, we forever put our hope in you. For all these things, O Sovereign, let your name be forever praised and blessed, O God, our Redeemer and Helper. Let all who live affirm you and praise your name in truth. Blessed are you, Adonai, your name is goodness, and you are worthy of thanksgiving. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh lehodot. So I think we should do a Sim Shalom if you're up for it, Barbara, because we talked about praying for peace. Just springing things on her left and right. And you're muted, but you probably knew that. You're still muted.
Sim shalom tova ubracha chen v'chesed berachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha barcheinu yotzreinu kulanu ke'echad ve'or panecha Kireor panecha natata lanu Adonai Eloheinu Sim shalom Tova ubracha Ein v'chesed berachamim aleinu Ve'al kol Yisrael amecha Torah chaim me'ahavat chesed u'tzedaka u'verachamim v'chaim v'shalom Sim shalom tova u'bracha chen v'chesed berachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha v'tov be'einecha levarech et amcha Yisrael bechol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך שים shalom Tova ubracha Ein v'chesed berachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha Baruch atah Adonai amarech et amo Yisrael
We take a few moments now for silent prayer to express the gratitude for the blessings in our lives and to offer prayers for those things we need most dearly.
Oh, say shalom b'momot U'ya'aseh shalom aleinu Ve'al kol Yisrael Ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru
We continue now with our service for reading Torah, and we open with joyous words of Torah celebration.
Lecha Adonai Hakura v'Hagvura Yai Lai Lai V'Hatiferet v'Hanetzav
Our Torah portion for this morning is Bishalach, and it is, as I have said a couple of times this morning, about the crossing of the Red Sea, amongst other things. But I actually want to talk this morning about the moments that precede the crossing of the Red Sea. And I want to talk a little bit about the very first verses of the Torah portion. I'm going to share my screen so you can see them. So, as our portion begins, first it says that when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although it was nearer. It was the shorter route. Rather, they had to go the longer route, for God said, the people may have a change of heart when they see war and may want to return to Egypt. So God led the people in a roundabout way by way of the wilderness and the Sea of Reeds. So that's how we got to the Sea of Reeds. It was not the most direct route, but we had to take this indirect route because God was worried that we would lose the strength of our conviction and we would want to turn back to Egypt. And then it says, sort of apropos of nothing, Moses took with him the bones of Joseph, who had made the children of Israel swear repeatedly, saying, God will be sure to take notice of you, then you shall carry up my bones from here with you. So there is this sort of interlude where it says that Moses had to take Joseph's bones. What is it referring to when it says that Moses had to take Joseph's bones? Well, if we go back to the end of Genesis, when Joseph is about to die, he says to his brothers, I'm about to die. God will surely take notice of you. He uses that same phrase that was in our verse. God will surely take notice of you. God will surely take notice of you and bring you up from this land to the land that God has promised an oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, when God has taken notice of you, you shall carry up my bones from here. So Joseph makes his children and his brothers and his children make this promise that even though he is dying in Egypt, that his bones will be exhumed and that he will be taken back at some point to the promised land to be buried in the same place as his ancestors. And so when we have this same phrase that God has taken notice and is bringing us out of Egypt, then we need to fulfill this promise that was made generations before. The Israelites have been in slavery 400 years, and there was some time before that, so it's been quite a while since the lifetime of Joseph, and Moses feels this obligation to fulfill this promise. There is this midrash that says, how did Moses know where Joseph was buried? The Egyptians had taken Joseph's bones and put them in a metal sarcophagus and put it into the Nile River, maybe as a way of appeasing the Nile, but maybe also as a way of sort of like downplaying the importance of Joseph. And so he had been buried in the river for all this time, and no one knew exactly where. There is this character who is mentioned in the Torah twice. Once in the generation of Joseph and his brothers, and then once there is someone by the same name. Her name is Serach bat Asher, Serach, the daughter of Asher. She is mentioned in the generation of the Israelites wandering in the wilderness. So the rabbis have this idea that there was one person who lived from the time of Joseph all the way through slavery and was freed with the Israelites miraculously, and this was Serach bat Asher. So while everybody is packing to get ready to go, Moses goes to Serach and says, hey, we got to do this thing with Joseph's bones. Do you know where he's buried? And she tells him the place, and he goes to the banks of the river, and he says to Joseph's bones, he says, hey, we're leaving now. We made a promise to you all these generations before, and if you are to appear to me right now, we'll take you with us. But if you don't appear to me right now, then we're going to be free from the oath that our ancestors swore, because if you're not going to help me, I can't help you. And then that moment, the bones of Joseph in the metal sarcophagus miraculously rise up out of the Nile River, and Moses is able to collect the bones and take them with them, and they carry them with them all through the wilderness wandering. And after Moses dies, the children of Israel carry the bones with them into the promised land. And in the book of Joshua, we're told that the people of Israel gathered together and buried Joseph's bones in the promised land. And so there is this fulfillment of this long delayed promise that that comes to fruition because of all of these different people who had a hand in making this thing happen that it took forever to happen. And there is a sense in the Torah, um, from this story and others, of the value of incrementalism, of the value of sort of slow and steady winning the race. And there can be uh, an instinct, a desire to sort of focus on these major revolutionary moments and these major revolutionary figures, which are important, but are often, when we examine them, not as revolutionary as we might think. The story of Moses is a good example. In the story of Moses, we have this one unique individual who leads his people to freedom. Except that we see in the very first chapters of Exodus all of the organizing and political resistance that was happening prior to Moses' birth. The resistance of the midwives who refused to follow Pharaoh's order to kill the Israelite babies. The resistance of the Israelites who continue to have babies even when that has been outlawed. The resistance of Yocheved, Moses' mother, who hides her baby instead of casting him into the river. And the resistance of Pharaoh's daughter, who sees an injustice and stands up even when it's in her own family. We have all of these people who are doing the work of making this movement happen so that Moses can be Moses. And when we read about Moses and we read about the crossing of the Red Sea and him holding his staff over the water, and we read about the 10 plagues, there's this sense of looking at this revolutionary moment that is Moses creating the Exodus from Egypt, when in truth, that was actually work that had begun generations and generations before. We have the same tendency when we look at civil rights movements, to think of the of sort of these revolutionary moments and these revolutionary figures, and I think that there is value in that. I don't want to say that those revolutionary figures or those moments aren't important, but they are often the culmination of many longer moments, right? We tend to talk about Rosa Parks sitting on that bus like as this moment where she decided, no, this is the end, I'm not doing this, as opposed to what really happened, which is that Rosa Parks was a part of a movement that was about doing these bus protests, and she was sort of chosen for that moment on that day to make the public statement because she was a part of this larger network of people who had been organizing for that moment. That moment was only possible because of all those other moments before it. There was this amazing thing that happened in America in the 2000s, which was there was around the issue of LGBTQ equality. In 2001, there was a study that showed that about 2/3 of Americans were opposed to marriage equality. 2/3 of Americans were opposed to marriage equality. By the time that marriage equality passes the Supreme Court in 2015, and after that, there's another study that shows basically that those numbers had flipped. That 2/3 of Americans supported, after the Supreme Court decision, marriage equality for GLBTQ individuals. And that is a mind-boggling shift. Statistically, you do not see in America a sort of public opinion shift of sort of 2/3 of the people switching positions, or a third of America switching positions in the span of 15 years. That is incredible and revolutionary and important, and part of the ongoing work of GLBTQ equality is sustained by the fact of that change. But GLBTQ equality didn't start in 2001, and it didn't end with marriage equality in 2015. That people had been organizing and trying to get cases to the Supreme Court and participating in the Stonewall riots and trying to assert, campaigning. I was just reading yesterday about the campaign to have homosexuality delisted as a mental illness because it was listed in the psychology manual as a mental illness for many years, was a slow campaign of not just showing up at the meetings of the Psychological Association and saying, you have to change this, it's wrong, but actually encouraging psychologists to do studies, actual studies that would show that it was wrong, which was a multi-year process, and took the sustained work of leaders so that we can get to the revolutionary moment, so that as GLBTQ equality becomes mainstream, that in the 2000s we can see this giant pendulum swing. And we even see it in this moment now that we're having around racial equality around George Floyd, which I really do hope is a revolutionary moment, but is also a moment made possible. Like, Black Lives Matter was not born in the moment after George Floyd died, and certainly the fight for racial equality was not born then, but was built upon generations of a struggle for equality. And so we see in our portion this slow and methodical change that is possible. Maimonides points to that verse that we looked at before the verse of Joseph's bones as a symbol of the way in which God tries to help us to achieve change. There's this question that could be asked, which is, why not just God make us the way we need to be? God make us just. God make us faithful. God make us who we're supposed to be. But Maimonides says that would be a denial of, an undermining of free will. And so in the verse that we looked at before, and in the verse that I'm going to read shortly, it says that the people might have had a change of heart if they had seen war of with the Philistines, and they would have wanted to go back to Egypt. God knows that the people have this fear that might undermine their progress. And so God takes them the long way. And Maimonides says that the long way is the only way that we're going to achieve change. And Maimonides says that that God chooses not to perform miracles that are about changing human beings' minds or hearts. God can perform miracles in the world. According to Maimonides, God can make seas part and plagues happen. But God doesn't change our minds and our hearts, because if God did that, then we wouldn't have free will. Maimonides points to prayer and sacrifice. Maimonides says that we have to assume that prayer is better than sacrifice. Otherwise, when the temple was destroyed, we would have not been allowed to pray, because it wouldn't have been as good as sacrifice, and we wouldn't be allowed to talk to God anymore. But it's actually true that prayer is better than sacrifice. So when the temple was destroyed, we could still do the thing that was even better, which was pray in our hearts and say the words of our prayers. And then Maimonides asked the question, so why did God have sacrifice at all? Why didn't God change the rule and just say there's no sacrifice? And Maimonides says that it's because the ancient people in the world around the Israelites had sacrifice, and so the ancient Israelites thought that was the way to pray to God. And God wasn't going to change our minds. God was going to help lead us slowly over time towards the realization that the true way to talk to God is not by killing animals and burning vegetables. It's by praying in our hearts and talking to God. And God understands that is a slow and incremental process. Just like in this verse, God understands that we sometimes have to take the long route, have to take the long way around. God understands that this is a slow and incremental change that may be punctuated with revolutionary moments and revolutionary leaders, but is actually about the sustained work of change, the sustained work of our own internal work. How do we spend our 40 years in the wilderness learning how to become free, even though it's like a 5-day walk from Egypt to the promised land, because that is about our internal work, about taking the slow way in a way that allows us to do the sustained work. And I don't want to be caught here saying that I'm saying that everybody should slow down and wait for their civil rights, because that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, in the fight for civil rights, what we need is not only revolutionary moments, but the longer sustained movements that actually bring those civil rights about. I'm not saying for anyone to sit back and wait for their rights to come. I'm saying to join the fight, and to join others in the fight for those rights. But I'm saying that what is important in that work is not only these water change moments, but also these long sustained movements. And to end, I will just say that there is this beautiful midrash that says that they took that casket that Joseph's bones were buried in, and they carried it with them. The Israelites carried it with them in the wilderness, and they carried it right next to the ark that contained the tablets of the covenant. And when they would pass by a stranger would say, "What's with those two boxes that you're carrying around?" And someone would say, "Well, one of them contains bones and one of them contains the Torah." And the person would say, "Well, why do you have both bones and the Torah?" And someone would respond, "Because what is in one is the fulfillment of the promise made in the other." What we need is to remember that it took hundreds of years to fulfill the promise made to Joseph, to make it so that his bones made it back to Egypt, to the promised land. It took hundreds of years, and that was the fulfillment of a messianic and visionary promise that was made in Genesis, that was a part of our story. And that as we move in this world, and as we work towards justice, and as we work towards fulfilling the promise that is written in our Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal, a promise also made a few hundred years ago that we haven't truly yet ever kept. As we work towards that, we remember that we carry with us both the text that is that promise and the text that is the bones of our ancestors that are still, that fought and that continue to fight to make that promise a reality. And we have the opportunity to look at both of those arcs. The Hebrew word for coffin and the Hebrew word for ark is the same word. To look at both of those arcs and to see both of them as holy and sacred, the bones that are our stories and the texts that are our stories, as an opportunity to give us sustenance, to give us vision, to create new possibility as we continue to work our way towards the promised land. So with that, I'm going to read those verses that I showed you just a moment ago. I can make them a hair bigger. Yep. Okay. As we continue to focus on the message of revolutionary and evolutionary change. I should share my screen. Okay. Hopefully you can see that. Vayhi bishalach paro et ha'am velo nacham Elohim derech eretz Pelishtim ki karov hu ki amar Elohim pen yinachem ha'am bir otam milchama v'shavu mitzrayma v'yasev Elohim et ha'am derech hamidbar yamsuf v'chamushim alu v'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim vayikach Moshe et atzmot Yosef imo ki hashbe'a hishbi'a et b'nei Yisrael lemor pakod yivkod Elohim etchem v'ha'alitem et atzmotai mizeh itchem. And while we have thoughts of Torah on our lips and words of Torah in our midst, we offer a prayer for healing and hope and strength and wholeness and recovery for all of those in our lives who are in need of refuah shlema, who are in need of wholeness. We think of all of those in this world, the ever-increasing numbers who are struggling with COVID-19. We pray for them. We pray for the people who take care of them, who hold them, and who hope for them. With the words of Misha Beirach, page 253.
Shema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. And let us say,
A few brief announcements on this Shabbat. Next Saturday, February 6th at 7 p.m. is our monthly installment of Havdalah for All, led by Cantor Simmons and Barbara Lozer. This event will be on Zoom, and if you pre-register, we'll send you that link. I just want to remind you, some of you, I think that it's Havdalah for some, but it is Havdalah for all. So you should come, because it's going to be great. It's lovely. I'm certain that my 3-year-old will make me come, which is great because I love to come. She will probably take me off mute again while I'm not looking and embarrass me in front of everyone. It'd be great. Okay, the community is also invited to join us as we showcase the short documentary Ever Open that we created for our 75th anniversary on Sunday, February 7th at 7 p.m. The broadcast will be followed by a talk back with our congregant and the documentary's director, Stephen Fenberg. Registration for that can also be found on our website. We realized that we never got to have a good in-depth conversation with Stephen about creating that documentary and about what it meant to him and what he learned from the people who participated. And so it'll be a great opportunity you get to see lots of footage of the temple. If you're missing seeing footage of the temple, that's a great time to tune in. We turn our prayerful attention now to Mourner's Kaddish. Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones and those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, life and death. We take a few moments now for silent memory. We think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who have died at this season in years past, and those whom we have drawn into our hearts with our own. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be for a blessing. We rise together as one community for the words of Mourner's Kaddish, page 294. Hitgadal v'hitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach yurtei ve'al michma chutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon u'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'gala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam omel maya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitchomam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yithaleh v'yithalal shmei dikudsha brichu, le'ela mimkol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'ne'emata. Damiram be'ama v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru amen. We shift now from Kaddish to Kiddush. As we are settling ourselves, here I'll go to gallery view. You get both of us. All right, here we go. Take it away, Barbara.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. L'chaim.
L'chaim. And Motzi.
Motzi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz b'te'avon.
Hey, Avon. Alrighty. Our closing song for this morning is Lady's Choice.
I think we're gonna sing Maya Fehayim. Maya Fehayim, Shabbat Shalom. Maya Fehayim, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
God who is with us in the depths, God who walks with us on the long journeys of our lives, God who stands with us in moments of fear and trepidation. We are standing on the shore of the sea. The water is lapping at our ankles. We are ready to march forward into new promise, into new possibility. We are seeking new fruitfulness even in the depths of the sea. We are seeking new hope. We are seeking strength for the long journey ahead, strength to know the difference between wants and needs, strength and patience as we build a brighter future and as we work our way through this long wilderness and towards the promised land. We thank you for the many blessings in our lives, and we say together, Amen.
Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.